Hey, Mike.
Hello.
We are continuing our movie week in celebration of the upcoming Oscars with another exciting movie club. We got Lucasfilm's More Than Robots today, produced by Separate Club, who did things like Marvel 616, and directed by Gillian Jacobs, who also directed an episode of Marvel 616.
Best known as Britta from TV's Community.
Not best known as director of Marvel, one episode of Marvel 616?
No.
Okay. And focuses on the FIRST Robotics Competition, which you may have heard of because Disney has partnered with them. This season that the documentary focuses on was focused on Star Wars. And is a documentary about what was supposed to be a full season of this robotics competition, founded by Dean Kamen, who invented the Segway and the Coca-Cola freestyle machines. So what do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I just watched this morning. I thought it was really interesting, something I did not know a lot about, and certainly found out a lot about it through the documentary. It was inspiring to see all these kids getting excited to participate in something like this, which I definitely didn't have in high school. There was no robotics team in my high school, so I'm a little jealous that they get something cool like that. But yeah, it's a really neat thing. I thought it was a little dry at times. I thought it could use a little bit more humor for a documentary about kids and robots. It was very like presentational. Like, here's how this competition works. Here's how the kids prepare for the competition and build their robots and get it all ready. And then we did follow probably what would you say, like half a dozen of the kids around on their personal lives and talk to their families about their thoughts on the competition. And yeah, it was sad at the end. It had kind of a downer ending because that year's competition, you could kind of tell at the beginning. In fact, I said to my wife as I was watching it, like, oh, this is like February 2020. Is this going to end with this competition getting canceled due to the pandemic? And yeah, sure enough, that's what happens. It all kind of comes to a screeching halt. But then like the last 10 to 15 minutes is about how the kids kind of adapt to that situation and come up with ways to use their robotic skills to actually like help out during the pandemic, which I thought was a good way to spin it. And it's a challenge. I know it's a challenge for a documentarian when something like that, like a curveball, gets thrown your way in the production stage of the documentary. So I think they found a good way to deal with that and tie it all together about how these kids were using those skills in their actual lives.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, you can tell they kind of focus on 4 teams, 2 domestic and 2 international. And, the domestic teams at least get to do their regional competition, and, we see how that plays out. And then the international, those folks, kind of get a letdown. You don't really get to see the robots in action. But as you said, it did kind of they did mention the what they did to help their community. I remember participating in a Twitch stream where they went through each team and they discussed their robots, what they did to help the community and, their thoughts on it, which was, a pivot from sort of the fun of throwing balls into a opening and balancing and all that stuff. But you can kind of sense where the documentary wanted to go and where it kind of had to pivot in the last 15 minutes or so. I wonder what the pacing would have been if the regionals wasn't the culmination of at least the competition part. Right. Would have sort of not been a step and then, a much more minor part. And then, we would have seen the big national, international event at the end. And, because you're watching it, and your mind, February 2020, like what's coming, but you think like, okay, if this isn't the ending, then the pacing is really off.
Yeah. And I did find myself kind of like rooting for certain teams. I don't know if you were like,
Mhm.
these kids are kind of the underdogs. I
Yeah.
kind of want them to go all the way. And then like, there's that part where the robot has to like grab onto the pole and lift itself up, and one of the arms gets tangled or whatever. And you're like, oh no, it kind of did feel like a sporting event in that
Well,
way.
they mentioned that in the documentary about how it's like, they wanted it to be a sport, they wanted halftime shows. They wanted,
Yeah.
the refs wear like, zebra stripes. They wanted mascots. And you got the sense that, and even it's, they usually use Twitch these days, but, they even showed how one year they competed at Epcot and it was on ESPN. So you can kind of tell that they would love it to become like a sport, so to speak. Not so much from the monetary side, but just from building that excitement.
Yeah.
Kind of, because that's what we culturally understand competition to be. Using those tropes.
Yeah, I remember there was a show called BattleBots. Did you ever watch that? And that was a little bit more about the robots destroying each other than this kind of very specific, these games have very specific rules that they have to follow and score points that way. But yeah, I feel like there's always these like off the beaten path kind of competitions that they want to turn into spectator sports. Like I remember reading a book about competitive Scrabble players, and how they wanted like ESPN to show the competitions and stuff. And it's just like, well, it's a kind of more of a like a niche thing. Like, yeah, everybody who's there is really into it, but I don't know if it really would play on a grander scale.
Well, that's what's interesting, because sometimes these things do kind of break through.
Yeah, like e-gaming or whatever.
Right. Well, or sometimes it kind of breaks through temporarily. Like, I mean, I remember, NASCAR was like on television sometimes, and it was, tape delayed a lot of times, and then it became like a huge thing, and then the bottom kind of dropped out of it, and you know, I think e-gaming is kind of the same way. It's like, at least, and I'm looking at through, Disney lens. Like, okay, ESPN creating an e-gaming team. They were televising League of Legends tournaments and all this stuff, and then it kind of became like, not so much.
Yeah, but I know that e-gaming is still a big. I don't know if it's. I don't have ESPN or whatever, but like I know that it's still a big deal. Like I don't know where is it on Twitch that they're broadcasting this? Or
Yeah, I think Twitch kind of took that over, which
yeah,
it's kind of interesting to me. And I mean, this is getting a little off topic, but it's like when the NHL came back to ESPN, their ratings increased because I feel like people just turn on ESPN. Like it's the sports bar default. It's when people don't know, there's nothing else drawing their attention, they may just turn it on and see what's on. And people can, like, as you said, we were getting invested in this robot competition. It's not like I'm a robot expert, but you're like, anytime there's people competing, you go like, ooh, I wonder who's going to win, and I think we have that with the Olympics. It's like, we care about these sports every 4 years because it's the Olympics, but we don't, like, we're not watching speed skating at home like year round. So, I think if you get, I mean, I watch some e-gaming and it's like, I'm not good at video games, but it's like, ooh, you get invested because like, who's going to win? Like, I want the underdog to win, or, whatever.
Yeah, and I definitely felt myself rooting kind of for my home team, the Watts team. I forget what they were called, the Megawatts or something like that. Kind of a clever Terawatts, yeah. But yeah, they seemed like they talked about how they didn't have a lot of funding at their school for their club and stuff. So it seemed like, okay, these kids are not coming from the kind of background that you would expect to be participating in this competition, but they're still at least getting to the point where they're able to participate and have the robots do the things you want them to do. So for that reason, I was definitely rooting for them.
Yeah, it's funny because you're rooting for these kids, like, because I mean, part is, going back to my high school experience. It's not like if they're high. I mean, granted, that was like 3 centuries ago, but like, they're probably not the cool kids,
right?
And you want them to succeed in this because you want them to succeed in life, and they're maybe not the most charismatic, and I think it's cool that they have to work as a team because it builds those skills that they'll need. It's one thing to be a great engineer. It's another to be a great engineer of people skills who can,
Right.
actually like do the other part of the job, which is navigating the team environment and everything. So,
And I definitely saw myself in them for the reasons that you just listed, because I was a super dork in high school and still am, and was not terribly. I feel like I'm a slightly more charismatic now than I was in high school because it was not very personable. But I did participate in something called Quiz Bowl in high school, which was basically just like a game show that was like, assorted knowledge trivia, basically. So that was the closest thing I came to something like this. And we did okay. We went to like the regionals or whatever. But it wasn't broadcast or televised or even recorded anywhere. Like, I don't think I could find any record of me having participated in that. But yeah, it's just the cool thing that's available. And I hope this inspires more kids to want to get involved.
yeah, it's funny because it's like Alex saw this at South by Southwest in the theater, and they had a Q&A. Unfortunately, he's attending another event today, but I watched on Disney Plus, and like I feel like I was constantly like Wikipediaing, and like Googling first just to try to kind of get more information about it, because it's like, there's a lot of people there. It's not a small sort of, and it's been on my radar when Disney announces, Lucasfilm's partnering, but it's definitely not on my radar of like, oh, I wonder what the first competition is this year, and I think it was interesting to get a chance to learn more about it, because as I said, it would pop up on my on the radar and be like, they talk about it like I'm supposed to know what it is, but I definitely didn't. And so you put up the press release kind of vaguely knowing what you're talking about, and it's just interesting.
It is interesting, and I was actually kind of thinking, like, if they held another event in Southern California, I might like to go and check it out if it's open to the public or whatever, to go and just watch as an observer and as a fan, because it's cool. It's just cool to see the different approaches to building the robots and how they play out in the competition.
So one thing that this movie got me thinking about, I wanted your take on it, is this was a Lucasfilm movie. Obviously, the first competition was themed around Star Wars, but this is not a Star Wars movie. This is not it's only very tangentially connected. And there's been reports of like, whether Lucasfilm should do non-Star Wars, non-Indiana, not, make new stuff again.
Yeah.
And what as a fan of Star Wars, and I think Lucasfilm in general, what's your take on what Lucasfilm should put its attention to?
Yeah, well, as you know, I just did throughout the calendar year of 2021, I did a Lucasfilm retrospective, basically looking at and talking about every single major project that Lucasfilm was involved with from its inception until Disney bought the company in 2012. And I would definitely love to see Lucasfilm make more things that aren't just Star Wars or Indiana Jones. And this is a great example of that, something that kind of spun out of Star Wars, but also spun out of George Lucas's like interest in furthering education, because another plug from my podcast, Who's the Boss here, but I just had my friend Adam on a couple weeks ago to talk about how Star Wars connects with the field of education. And so that's another thing I've been reading about and interested in. So I'm glad we got this documentary from Lucasfilm. I'm glad that they are still pursuing stuff outside of those big franchises. But, they just dropped that, or I'm not sure what happened behind the scenes, but they were going to make that fantasy adaptation. I forget what the title was, and then it got picked up by Amazon or something
Paramount,
instead.
I believe.
Paramount. Okay. So yeah, I don't know what happened there, but I would have liked to see something else coming out of the company. And I hope that they are still looking into other projects like that.
So if you could build a robot, what kind of robot would it be?
Oh boy. I always pictured having like you always think like, oh, the future everybody's gonna have a robot when you're growing up. But then when I think about like an astromech droid or something, we have a very cluttered apartment, and the droid would just have no room to, Tori always wants to get a Roomba to clean up, and I'm just like, well, there's no floor space. Where is the Roomba gonna go? Like, I don't know what kind of robot. I think a robot that does the dishes would be great thing to invent, or yeah, just like menial chores that I don't enjoy doing. But then you get into the whole question of like ethics and AI, because in Star Wars the robots seem to be at least somewhat sentient, and yet they are basically slaves. So the question becomes like, well, they are manufactured by people, but they seem to have feelings and emotions and stuff. So is it okay to like have these robots working for you? I don't know. I don't think that would ever really happen in reality.
I am curious as to what the when they're going to tackle the sort of existential existence of droids, like,
yeah.
But
I mean, they did it a little bit in Solo when you had L337, who was like the she wanted to set all the droids free when they visited the spice mines of Kessel and everything. So there is a little bit of that. They have acknowledged that at least, but they droids are still just owned by people. So who knows?
I feel like Jetson set up unreasonable expectations of what robots could do in my life.
Yeah.
And it's like when I love dogs, and like, as a single person, in my younger days, I was like, I couldn't have a dog with my work schedule. And so I was like, when those robot dogs came out, I was like, oh, like, that's what I want. But then I went to go like look at it, and I was like, I don't want a robot dog that looks like a robot dog. I want a robot dog that looks like a dog.
Right.
Like,
right.
No one wants to snuggle with like cold plastic.
No, totally agreed. Yeah, just I don't know. I don't know if I would actually want. I think I'd be creeped out by having a robot, like a robot assistant, or even a robot pet. It'd just be a little creepy to me. I remember. You ever see that movie AI?
I didn't.
Okay.
There's also like the sort of like Isaac Asimov robots, and then there's like a Roomba, and there's a big gap in there.
It's like. It's kind of ironic and kind of ties into what we usually talk about, that I feel like the best application we've really come up with for robots is to be audio animatronics in the parts. I mean, I don't know. There's probably robots that build cars, whatever. I don't know.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have robots are good at doing similar tasks, like repetitive tasks, which most people don't do. It's assembly. We're not building things daily, so it's hard to think of like what's worth the investment to do a task that I do once a day. Do I need a robot to tuck me in at bed at night and like read me a story? But like,
yeah.
I mean, that's how I feel about these like virtual assistants. Is like, I have them because Disney gave them, but like, what's easier, me just to like look at the clock and say it's 15 minutes, or me go, Alexa, it's 15 minutes, and I just screwed up all you people that have Alexas at home, but
not me.
But any case, so you're back tomorrow, huh?
Back to where?
Movie club.
Oh, yes. We're going to be talking about my favorite film of the year, Deep Water.
I cannot wait to see what you and Alex have to say about this film. I'm not going to throw anyone under their bus, but, we're a fan site. We try and, I don't want to say we try and like things, but, we tend to be positive on things. We want to be positive on things.
I always say that I go into everything that I have to review and everything that I watch in my personal life or read or whatever. I always want to like things. I never want to dislike things, but it is sometimes fun to get to write a negative review, which is what I did for Deep Water.
Well, and it's so, we send them off to the publicist, and sometimes they go like, oh, wow, like, I can't believe you didn't like it. And sometimes they go like, yeah, I get it. I'll let you figure out which one category you want.
Okay. Based on the Rotten Tomatoes score, I think I can guess.
And then you got a busy day tomorrow too. You got Star Wars headlines, huh?
Yep. Talking
Okay.
more about Galactic Star Cruiser, probably a couple comic books. I think at least one book review. Yeah.
Well, great. And I have lots of questions about your Star Cruiser experience, but I know we've talked about that on like 18 other shows. So I will just ask that in private. And hope
That has a couple robots.
Hope you have a great day. And thanks so much for watching, everybody.
Yeah, watch More Than Robots. It's on Disney Plus.